back.
Hello again.
ITAM Accelerate. We are ITAM Accelerate, and we are talking about the corporate governance process today.
Yes, and this is where you set your North Star. This is the guiding torch or light that directs your efforts in regards to whatever it is you want SAM or ITAM to address.
And actually, in ISO 19770-1, there's a section that says the organisation shall establish an IT asset management system, and this is what the corporate governance process does. It is the establishment of the IT asset management system. But how do you do that? It's
Yes.
not enough to just say we're going to do this.
Yeah, normally if it's off the back of a world of pain, so you'll have been through the wrong end of a vendor audit.
Yeah.
Something disastrous will have happened with IT,
Yeah.
and the idea that you haven't got basic information in place to know where your IT actually is.
Yeah.
You might have had a security breach even.
Yeah.
That could be a driver.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, use it, feel the pain, work that pain, and use it to drive you to a less painful place.
Yep, absolutely. So the triggers for this this process really are a change, because there's been a change, and that may be a disaster, as Rory has just said, but it may also be that your business or your market conditions or the way your business operates has changed, or your business is starting to struggle, so they need to become a lot more cost conscious. So all of these things can drive the need to build out a new North Star, or Southern Cross if you're Australian.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it helps to have senior management approval for developing a strategy and developing the management system. But to be honest, most organisations have something in place already, so that de facto approval is there. But what you do need to do is you do need to engage senior management to get their sponsorship, because they're the ones that can really help you drive the changes through that are required to actually implement the new management system.
Yeah, so any help around either authority or budget to make it happen is going to come from these folks.
Yeah.
So that's the level you need to be batting at there. And also because they will have their own respective vision or direction that they want to take their own given area of the business in.
Absolutely.
So making them aware of, well, ITAM can do this for you, SAM can do that for you, it just cuts through a lot of the wheat and the chaff, basically.
Yeah. So fundamentally, the strategy development process is thinking about where you are now, thinking about where you need to be, and then thinking about a really high-level roadmap to get you from A to B. That's all it is. But what that involves is going out and talking to people. It involves actually listening at town hall meetings, actually taking a look at the boring strategy documents that the CIO sends around, and really absorbing those and understanding what your business is doing, how IT and technology supports that, and then how IT asset management needs to support those technology changes and that technology strategy. And so it all comes from where your business is trying to go, or where your organisation as a whole is trying to go, and then how technology is required to support that direction. And then out of that, you build the North Star that you're marching towards. You build an understanding of where you are now and what needs to change. And then you think about, well, what is our scope that we're talking about? What are we covering? Is it just software? Is it plus hardware to the extent that it allows us to manage software? Is it hardware as well? Does it include cloud? Is it all parts of the organisation, or are some parts of the organisation going to be sort of left out of this? So you need to agree that. That's really important.
Yeah. And also as well, is it all vendors or is it all titles?
Yeah.
So there's a further sub-filter to be applied there as well.
Yep, there's a lot around scope to be thinking through. And then you develop that high-level roadmap that says, okay, we need to change these areas. But you don't go into too much detail. You just say, these are the areas that need to change and these are how they need to change. And it's really that, keeping it high level like that, as long as it is recognisable and relates everything back to where the business is going and how technology is supporting that, that is sufficient. You don't want too much detail because you want people to be saying, yes, I can see that we do need to change in that way. But if you throw loads of detail at them, it's too much. So you need to build the high level stuff and then gradually work your way down through levels and levels of detail. So the corporate governance stuff is high level.
Yeah, and that's a top tip as well for the workshops that you'll do. You'll be doing acres of filtering. You'll be getting loads of white noise. You'll be getting loads of really actually valuable and interesting information that everybody feels their little bit of the world needs to be in the ITAM policy. That needs distilling to the point of you make a decision as to whether it is or not.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is about having gathered that information already is that if it doesn't sit in the policy, it could very well sit in the plan. So don't feel that if it's not sort of the kind of language you'd use at a Harvard Business Review meeting, or you've picked up off an MBA or whatever, don't dismiss it out of hand, because it could be really, really useful further down the line.
So the policy is really important, often more in the breach than in the actually complying with it, because I don't think anybody's ever actually, well, occasionally it might happen, been held up for not managing or sort of breaching a policy. Very occasionally it might happen, but not necessarily. But what it does is it almost lays out a set of conditions under which people need to operate, and so it's a really important communication document. And if they do breach it, there is always that sense that potentially, if it's an approved policy, that potentially they could be disciplined against it. But that's actually really, really rare.
I think it's more where those policies are aligned to legislation and regulation, isn't it?
Yeah,
and it's not necessarily
exactly.
the policy that trips you up. It's the fact that you've broke the law or you've broke regulations. Then at that point.
And the other thing is, the larger your organisation is, the less likely it is to have an IT asset management policy.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you've got an information security policy, you've got a procurement policy, you've got an acceptable use policy, and actually, and I've done it, if you go through an IT asset management policy and then compare it with the information security policy and then the procurement policy, you will find that about 99% of what you need to be in a policy is already in a policy.
Yeah.
It's not called an IT asset management policy, but it is in there because IT asset management particularly supports information security, it supports procurement, and of course information security demands certain things of end users, which goes into the acceptable use policy, which are IT asset management oriented things. So don't feel that you need to build out an IT asset management policy. What you potentially could do is take a look at the information security policy and say, does it meet my needs? And look at the procurement policy and say, does it meet my needs? And if it doesn't, work with those parts of the organisation to amend their policies, which they should be reviewing, every year or so, to include what it is that you need to make sure that IT asset management is sorted. Yeah.
And if it's put in such a spin that supports service management or information security or whichever procurement policy or whichever policy you're plugging into, it should in theory fly through anyway. Nobody's going to get egregious about it and say, what's going on here? Why are you dropping this stuff in?
Yeah, because fundamentally good practice is good practice. It doesn't matter whether it's coming from information security or from procurement. It's still good practice.
Yeah.
What you could do is you could extract from those policies and then provide an extra level of detail about what people need to do in order to achieve ITAM outcomes. Because information security policies or procurement policies are written from a perspective where what they're producing is information security outcomes or procurement outcomes. They're not written to pull out the fact that we're doing these things to produce IT asset management outcomes. So what you can do is you can produce almost like a subordinate standard. So it's not policy level, it's the next level of detail down that pulls out things that need to be done to achieve IT asset management outcomes. But they always need to align to the actual policies. So the standards need to align to the policies. It's just an extra level of detail about how they will be implemented to achieve particular outcomes.
Yeah.
So that's another option in terms of policy. So is there anything else around that's in the corporate governance process that we need to address?
Just, I think, have that notion that your policy instigates the plan instigates the processes instigate the KPIs.
Yeah.
And if you're going to take an ISO approach to all of this, the KPI data should track back and support the policy up at the top. So there is this feedback loop. So if there is a deviation from what's taking place on a day-to-day basis that contradicts the policy, there is a mechanism by which that can feed back if it gets egregious enough, or is serious enough that a policy needs changing or whatever.
Yeah.
And don't forget, of course, policies will change anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
So the cascade, the downward trend is already established, but the upward trend tends to be ignored, and that's the nice thing, I think, too, about the -1 standard, is that it advocates a continuous improvement approach, and Plan, Do, Check and Act is one of the best ways to do that, the Deming cycle approach. So yeah.
Great. So this process leads out to the plan process, create and maintain a SAM plan process, and it also leads out to a couple of other processes, so a risk management process and a SAM awareness and communications process, which we'll talk about in other sessions.
Dun, dun, dun. Yes.
So there we go.
So that's all, folks. Thank you very much, and we will catch you next month.
See you later.
Thank you.